Welcome to a new video. Let's take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. The first story is called, "You Want Me to Eat Nothing Unless It's This?" My grandfather was the most stubborn person I have ever met. My grandmother and he were devout Roman Catholics, very much from the era of what the man of the house says goes. No matter what that may be. To the point, I had never seen her argue with him, except 2 times in my entire life, which is the time I will be referencing, and one time he straight up called me ugly for my black fingernail polish. He did apologize for that. But my grandma tore him up beforehand. That tongue lashing was nothing compared to the time in question. My grandfather, being old-fashioned, was big on the, "you eat what you are given, you don't leave until your plate is clean" mentality. Now, I was under 6 in this story, but I remember it clearly. Mostly because my grandma still sees about it and brings it up regularly. It was one of the first times I was staying with them without my parents, due largely to my parents divorcing, meaning it was their first time making my plate. The plate I was served was huge. I mean, thinking back, the plate they served me matched theirs. That was huge to someone as young and tiny as I was. It was dinner time, and Grandpa would not budge in his ways. I was crying. He was angry. And all because I was so full I could not eat anymore. My grandpa yelled and berated me, as a child, that I was going to finish my plate and I would not leave the table until I did. Okay. I don't leave the table. He sits there, expecting me to fold. But the problem was, that I have always been just as stubborn as he was, if not more. But only if you give me a reason to be, which he did. My bedtime was supposed to be around 8 because it was the summer. I sat at the table, growing more and more irate all the while. I did not eat. I did not leave the table. I followed his instructions. He finally gave in around 4 in the morning and lets me leave. That was what my grandmother told me. But of course, only if Grandma saves my now 10-hour-old plate for tomorrow. I didn't finish it, so now I would eat nothing else until that plate was finished. Grandma does that and happily takes me to bed at last. I think I slept basically until lunch. My grandma convinced him to allow me to. He was also the "everyone gets up at 6 in the morning" type. True to his word, he served me the plate. True to my resolve, I ate nothing. You don't leave until you finish the plate. So I didn't leave. This went on between us so long that my grandma, pillar of patience and everything that is good in a woman, who has hidden all but 2 arguments between her and her 50-year husband behind closed doors, loses it. By the time she does, mold has grown on this plate. I haven't eaten, at 6 or fewer years old, in actual days. You can imagine how my temperament had deteriorated. You can imagine how far my grandfather and I had pushed my grandma. You can imagine how long this went on, how long it took to break my grandma at long last. My grandma absolutely lost her patience. She took the plate and flung it, moldy food and all, across the room and screamed at my grandfather. I was silent, stunned, terrified. Grandpa was the same. I had followed instructions, she tells him. I had told him I couldn't eat that much when he first set the plate in front of me, as had she repeatedly when he was making it appear, and he had pushed the issue too far. She had tried to lightly stop this for days now, but lightly hadn't worked and she went all out. Eventually, terrified and starving, I completely deteriorate and was fully sobbing. My grandmother basically force-fed me Pop-Tarts and honeycomb cereal while going absolutely berserk on my grandfather. She was telling him that he's the adult and he shouldn't have pushed it so far just to be right, and if anything is wrong with me he is explaining to my father, their son. A very overprotective father. When my grandma every now and again brings this story up, mostly when I end up not finishing my plate, she makes sure to hit 3 points hard. I followed every rule my grandfather set forth like the stubborn, spiteful, hellish little gremlin I was and still am. My grandfather was undoubtedly in the wrong, because the reason I didn't eat the food that next day was because it had already basically gone bad and tasted poorly after sitting out for so long, plus my picky eater behind had already been force-feeding myself to begin with the night before. And she has only ever met one person in her lifetime as stubborn and absolutely unmoving in resolve as my grandfather. That's me. I distinctly remember my grandma made all of my plates until I was old enough to make them for myself if I was staying alone with them. And yes, my grandpa got chewed out again when Dad found out about it. The next story is called, "As You Say." I work for a very large pharmacy company as a dispensary assistant. We're always extremely busy and never have time to mess around. The company is always under the microscope, just in case we make mistakes in the rush. As we're under the microscope, we have some pretty strict rules: never leave a script halfway through handling it, whether you're boxing it up to put in the holding bay for a customer who is coming back or dispensing it. All addictive medications must be kept in the safe if the customer is coming back later. If they're in store, then it goes straight out. We ask for the ID, write the ID details on the script, then put the script in a special folder in the dispensary. It also needs to be put in a lockbox until it's paid for. And the pharmacists must sign and check every medication before it is given to the customer. The second rule is a law, but we take it a little further with the lockboxes. The rules are pretty standard. Our dispensary is at the back of the store with two sides, scripts in and scripts out. Scripts in has 2 desks, scripts out has 3. This shift had 2 people on scripts in and 2 on scripts out. At the time of this story, the other guy on scripts out was on lunch, so I was on my own. The store is great though, people will come and help when things get busy. I was pretty busy. Customers apparently can't line up, so there was a hellish mess of customers just lingering around the scripts out desks. So whenever I called the next customer up, there was a debate about who was next because no one knew. Customers, right? Scripts in had 5 people all neatly lined up. Lucky them. A customer approached me and asked if his script was ready. I recognized him as an ex-coworker at the toy store, so that lifted my spirits a bit. He showed me his buzzer and I said, I will go and see if it's ready yet. He told me he'd been waiting for 1 hour. I felt horrible, maybe I'd missed the basket or maybe the buzzer wasn't working, so I immediately went up the back to see what was happening. It had been dispensed, so I asked the pharmacist, who we'll call Tina, where it was. It's in the safe. It was addictive medicine. She shrugged as she texted. Can you get it for me? He was waiting in the store, it must have been mistakenly put in the safe. I don't like putting the blame on people, so I thought it was an honest mistake. Tina rolled her eyes, putting her phone down. She opened up the safe and pulled the medication out. Immediately, I noticed the massive note saying, waiting, and the buzzer number. Still, I gave her the benefit of the doubt. As there had already been one mistake, I checked for a signature and found nothing. I asked Tina to sign it for me so I could take it to him. I could almost hear the eye roll this time. Fine. Whatever. I'll do it in 10 minutes. Go and serve on scripts in. She was already texting again. He's been waiting for an hour. I can't just leave him. Please check and sign it so I can take it to him. He'll get upset if I ditch him to serve someone else. Anyone would get mad about you ditching them to serve someone else. Don't argue with me. Do what you're told. So I looked at my friend, then at scripts in with only one unattended customer. I smiled and said, okay, then walk to scripts in. My friend was mad, along with everyone else on scripts out. I served the one customer, giving her medicine and advice. 15 minutes passed. Tina finally goes down to scripts out with the medicine in hand. She calls the man over and he yells about the wait. I've been here for over 1 hour. I saw you talk, what is going on? He shouted at Tina. I didn't hear what she said back as the counters are pretty far apart, but it made him yell a little more. He swore a little before she handed the medication over in a bag. That was enough for our boss to chew you out. My coworker came back and sent me to lunch. I spent my break googling laws and chuckling to myself. That afternoon, I was sorting the scripts to file away when I saw it in all its glory. The script I had been hoping to see, unsigned and therefore unchecked. With a smirk, I pick it up and curiously approach a different pharmacist who we'll call Emma. Hey, Emma, I think Tina made a mistake, I said sweetly. I was dealing with this script and asked her to check it, but she told me to leave it to serve someone else. I guess she didn't check it. Now, Emma is the sweetest person I've ever met. She's a bit of a perfectionist, so this job is perfect for her. Something passes over her face and she turns to me. What do you mean? Well, this isn't signed. Come to think of it, I don't think she checked his ID or boxed it either. I checked the back of the script and there are no ID details. No, she didn't check it. Or at least didn't write down the details. I shrugged as I showed her the script. I was just doing what she said. I didn't want to get in trouble. Pharmacists have complete power in the store, anything they say goes, but they're supposed to let you follow the rules. Emma huffs and storms over to the computer. She saw everything. Emma was mad. She saves the footage and asks me to fill out a report. I detail how Tina told me to abandon the script to help scripts in, even though they weren't struggling. How she told me to abandon an entire crowd of restless customers. Emma is livid by the end of it and says she'll take care of it. She's so sorry that Tina did this. Skip forward a few days. Tina has put in a complaint about me for arguing. It wasn't a big deal, I knew I was in the right and they'd all find out soon, but for now, I'm on probation. Skip forward another few days, my manager apologizes. I'm off probation, as I was only doing as I was instructed. I don't see Tina again. There was something so satisfying about watching her get yelled at, then knowing she got caught. I assume she'd done it before too because they don't react like that to one incident. The last story is called, What Do You Mean? I had been working in the cinema industry for many years, working my way from lowly usher up to full manager. I had been working as a manager in a small, privately owned cinema, making a decent wage, but decided to take up a job offer from a big multiplex chain. Although it was less money, it was closer to home and I felt there were more job advancement opportunities. Worst career mistake I ever made. The chain was probably the worst employer I ever had. They were cheapskates when it came to wages and were very hostile to all their employees. If something happened that could be explained by either an honest mistake or malicious act, they would immediately assume maliciousness and treat it as such. As a manager, I was expected and required to work a minimum 56-hour week, even though the salary was based on a 40-hour week and there was no paid overtime. After a bit of rough calculation, I found I was being paid way less than the legal minimum hourly wage, so this should demonstrate what a bunch of cheapskates they were. On a day that was particularly slow, a directive came from above to let workers go home early, so as to save on the wages bill. I talked with every member of staff on shift that day, asking who wanted an early night. Some took me up on the offer, but since most were struggling students, they didn't want to take a loss of wages. On the next day, the area manager came for his monthly criticism visit to tell us all what a bunch of useless, lazy idiots we all were. He decided he would tell us off for not sending people home early as instructed. What the hell is up with the figures from yesterday? The attendance figures were abysmal and your staffing was too high. Didn't you get the memo to dismiss unneeded staff? Yes, I went round every staff member on shift last night and sent home everyone who wanted to. Unfortunately, not everyone wanted to cut their shift short. What do you mean, you asked? You tell them they're not needed. But if I do that, we still must pay them for the full shift. No, you don't. If they're not here, they don't get paid. That's not how it works. If we ask them to go and they agree, we don't have to pay. If we order them to leave, we are, in effect, putting them on suspension, which requires us to pay them. He went quiet at that and I thought that was the end of it. Till later that day, when a call from the district manager comes through to me. What's this I hear about you telling your area manager that you won't send staff home early when it's quiet? As I explained to him, if we order someone to go home early, we must pay them for the full shift. That's rubbish. If we don't need them, we don't pay them. I don't know where you got the idea it was any other way. Well, I consulted with a solicitor who specializes in employment law and she said it. You did what? How dare you discuss confidential company policies with a third party? You are nothing but a troublemaker and I am going to see to it that you suffer the consequences for this breach of confidentiality. With that, he hung up. About 20 minutes later, the phone goes again. This time, it's the company director, basically the head of all operations for the country. And she is super mad. Your managers have told me all about you. Who the hell do you think you are telling us how to run the company? Excuse me if I am mistaken. But I do believe part of my duties as a manager is to ensure that the company is not put in a legally actionable position, which we potentially could if someone decided to pursue an action against us in a case where we send someone home from a shift without payment. That's stupid. Who told you this nonsense? The company solicitor. After a few moments of silence, she said in a slightly quieter voice, What? Remember that employment law course you had all us managers go on? That's one of the topics that came up. Well, this is the first I'm hearing of this and this is a policy that has been in use for a while. That may be so, but all it takes is for one employee who knows their rights to bring a complaint against us and we won't have a leg to stand on. That may be so, but we are not going to change policy. We'll let this go for now, but I don't want you telling anyone about this. Another thing. We're sick of you stirring up troubles. From now on, if someone higher up in the management chain than you tells you to do something, you do it without any complaints. Do I make myself clear? Crystal clear. End of call. So that's the background. Now we get to the malicious compliance aspect of the story. Due to their attitude, the cinemas had a high turnover of managers. Most quickly got tired of the constant denigration and the poor wages and moved on quickly. As a result of this, we had a brand new general manager, who had no prior cinema experience. Now the new general manager was a bit annoyed as it was New Year's Eve, but we were opening for midnight screenings. The new general manager would rather be at a party getting drunk, so he decided that he was closing early and if anyone actually tried to buy tickets for one of the midnight screenings, he would just tell them that there was a technical fault. As I was on shift with him that night, I tactfully tried to dissuade him but was overruled. Of course, he got caught after the head office received a complaint, actually for another branch, which decided to do the same thing. But they cried that my general manager did it as well as if that somehow excused their actions. I was hauled in for a disciplinary with the district manager. I knew they were planning on firing me, as they had fired the assistant on duty at the other branch as well for being complicit. So, you were on shift that night? Yes. Did your general manager discuss with you that he planned to close early? He did. And what did you say? I strongly advised him to run the screenings as planned. We had advertised them in advance and thus had a duty to remain open. And you didn't think to bring this up with anyone higher up in management? I would have. But I have been expressly ordered by the company manager that if anyone senior to me in the management chain tells me to do something, I'm to do it without any complaints. He looked awkwardly at his notes. You can go now. The general manager gets fired and I kept my job, but obviously, I know my career with this company is going nowhere. I received no further promotion, as in their words, I'm not ready for more responsibility. But I am expected to train new management employees with no previous cinema experience who have been hired straight into a position senior to mine. Thankfully, no long after, I managed to move into a much better paying IT position and could wave goodbye to the worst employers I have ever had. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider subscribing to the channel for more content. Let me know what you think about the stories in the comment section below. Have a great day. Bye bye.